What makes you smile? Well, in a physical sense, what makes your mouth go like this? Or what genuinely makes you happy? For me and, well, all other Christians in this world, I imagine, it's Jesus' words. Ones like these. Mark 9:35. Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last, and the servant of all. It's so deliberately opposed to everything the world stands for. Like a piece of double bubble gum compared to a sugar-free cough drop. This is the world, and these are Jesus' words. And they're so completely different, but that's a good thing because they're the most important things. Now, to go back to the Bible times itself, the disciples were always concerned about who would be the greatest in God's kingdom, who would have the most reward, or who would sit right next to Jesus, or anything like that. We often have this problem too. Now, of course, there's 8 billion people and counting compared to like the 12 disciples that there were back in the Bible times, but it's still just about the same thing. Who is the most clever, like a really smart teacher? Who's the strongest, like your favorite superheroes? Who's the most important, like world leaders? Who's the most well-read? Who's the general best? Who's the prettiest, like the nicest looking celebrities? Who's the most sought after, like the biggest fads or newest hot albums? Who's the most successful, like the best selling artists of all time? Who's the richest, like, all of the Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos is out there? And who's the most spiritual, like the certain pastor that you look up to? Who? Usually there's an answer for all of this, but sometimes there's not. And one of the main things about humans, we always want an answer to everything. We always want an explanation. But, just like I mentioned earlier, Jesus' words are deliberately opposed to everything the world stands for. Jesus explains like this. In the world, the strongest and most overpowering people usually stand out above everyone else. If you put a random civilian you find on the streets of New York right next to Elon Musk, they're going to be completely different. If you put 100 random civilians you pick up from New York and put them right next to Elon Musk, he is obviously going to be the one that stands out because he's the strongest out of all of them in terms of like power and influence, and he's the most overpowering. Like he's constantly gaining power and riches and stuff like that. And they want to rule and control everyone. Like they want to have the biggest businesses with the most employees or the strongest country with the most military members. But it doesn't work this way in God's kingdom. It's completely opposite. It doesn't matter what you've accomplished or how important you may be. It might matter to this world, obviously, like the accomplishments of Microsoft as a company, they do matter to a lot of people. They're really important. But what actually matters, in God's kingdom, which is the kingdom that's above this earth, is if you can love without being loved in return. And I've touched on this in my previous video. Loving without being loved in return, that is what love is. It's true generosity. Love in of itself is selfless. So you have to act like that. This counts the most in God's eyes. It makes you the biggest winner. It makes you the greatest in his kingdom. So there is an answer for that. It makes you the most valuable in his kingdom. For such people, God has a special regard, the most rewards, all of that stuff. Man, imagine if the disciples knew this. Maybe they wouldn't have had a really long conversation about it during Passover. Don't take God's fondness for people too lightly. By that, I mean, you don't have to get into military mode every time God is kind to people. No, that's not necessary because one, it's literally happening all around us. So you would have to be in it basically 24/7. What it's basically saying is don't take it for granted. Don't take it as just something nice that God's doing. This is part of his character. And as Christians, we have to emulate his character. So we have to show fondness to people all the time, no matter what. And we can't expect to be loved in return because that's true generosity. So let's have a prayer. Lord, help It's easy to say that your words are more important than those of the world. I mean, it is easy. His words are the most important of the world. But then my words and my deeds reveal something different. It's really hard to live up to what the general Christian life should be. It's really hard to live up to a lot of instructions of the gospel. And we humans have a bit of an issue of being too stubborn and just always trying to take it on our own. I relate to this a lot. I usually like to try and do things on my own, but I'm embarrassed to admit that I never really take time to sit down and realize that it doesn't work. Please teach me more of your character and attitude, because as I said, as true Christians, one of the main characteristics that we need to adopt is being like God. Amen. I think that's what I'm going to do both.